Morning is to approve the regular minutes of October 6th of '09.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Stepka, supported by Fleece. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. This is the first opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to have public comment at this time? A second opportunity will be afforded at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, we'll move forward with the Grand Traverse Sheriff's Office.
Good morning, I'm Nate Alger, Under Sheriff, Grand Traverse Sheriff's Office. The first item I'm bringing forward today is, and I'm sorry, I do not have my agenda items.
Police vehicles.
You have vehicles first.
You have the items? Thank you. Police vehicle bids. We had a vehicle damaged in an accident a few months back. That was Lieutenant Monroe's vehicle, the jail administrator, and that vehicle's damage was estimated at greater than the vehicle's worth at the time. So we went for bids for vehicles to replace that vehicle. And since we were going for bids for that vehicle, knowing that we were not going to be able to potentially purchase vehicles in 2010, we were hoping to identify some funds in 2009 to use for vehicles. So we did go out for bids for patrol vehicles, investigative service vehicles, as well as jail administration vehicles. We did get those bids back. I believe I submitted with a listing of what the vehicle bids were, vehicle and cost. And what we have been in the process of doing over the past couple months is identifying funds inside our 2009 budget to potentially use for the purchase of vehicles in 2009. We have, to a large degree, done that, and we believe that there will be some funds available at the end of 2009 to use for vehicle purchases. Mr. Bott has prepared an analysis of the 702 or personnel line items. There's not a lot of money going to be left over in those items, but we have gone through the remaining budget line items and identified money that we could use for purchase of vehicles. Obviously, how many vehicles we're able to purchase is dependent on how much is left over at the end of the year and this board's willingness to allow us to do this. Our rationale for the request now is we don't know exactly where we stand with vehicles in 2010. We have an identified need currently for vehicles, jail administration vehicles, investigative service vehicles, and patrol vehicles. And we would like to take advantage of some potentially leftover funds in 2009. So I guess our request is twofold. Well, first, during the bid process, I did ask for used vehicle prices as well as new vehicle prices. I personally am not a big fan of used vehicles for law enforcement purposes, specifically patrol. However, Captain Hall did his diligence, went to some used car lots and talked to some folks about the pricing of used vehicles. And we believe that there may be some competitive pricing there for some vehicles. They did not bid used vehicles. They did not feel comfortable holding the vehicles pursuant to the bid requirements of 60 to 90 days upon placing the bid. But we believe we would be able to go to used car lots and purchase used vehicles at prices similar to or less than the vehicles listed on the bid spec sheet. So our request is if we can use 2009 leftover funds that we can identify for the purchase of vehicles, jail administration vehicles, investigative service vehicles, and any patrol vehicles that we have identified need for. I don't know what level of insurance or funding there would be for the vehicle that was totaled out.
Dean, do you know how much we got for that vehicle that was totaled? Okay.
Yeah. We would be willing to purchase used vehicles if the commission would give us a not to exceed amount for used vehicles. I think maybe that'd be the best way to do that because we don't know exactly how much a used vehicle is going to cost. We've identified in the spec sheet some used vehicles out of Bill Marsh, and if the commission wishes to go that route, I would request that we have a not to exceed limit for used vehicles.
just have a question for Dennis. What usually happens with the surplus money that the sheriffs have at the end of the year?
Well, I'm going to have Dean come up and talk about this as well. Let me give you kind of my brief summary. You know, typically what happens is each year, at the end of the year, Dean balances out the budget in the general fund and in all the other funds. In the general fund, some departments may overspend their budget, some departments underspend their budget. And it just depends on the year. And sometimes it's one year you overspend, one year you underspend. We don't do a lot of overspending, but it happens. We're concerned because this is a particularly tight year. First of all, two areas where we generally save money, the Sheriff's Department personnel and Central Dispatch personnel. In the personnel line items, we spend more in the overtime. We generally spend less in like the corrections budget or in the deputy's budget or for salaries. This year, for the first time in as long as I can remember, in many of those, for most of the year, a good part of the year, we've been fully staffed. So we have a little bit of concern because in a couple of those areas, which Dean can talk about, there are still overtime expenditures that are at not quite that high level, but at a significant level. So that, coupled with the fact that the revenues are not coming at the level we thought they were, remember our interest was down $500,000, and then added to that, and I hate to keep bringing these things up, but the decision, you guys made a decision that you were going to fund the MSU extension program 0 to 3 through the end of the year for $65,000, and that has to come from fund balance someplace. My concern, and I think Dean shares my concern, is we totally agree with this concept. We started this concept back in 2003, but we just don't know and won't know for a while how much money is there. And particularly of concern, and I understand the sheriff's position on this, but the sheriff's budget may have $50,000 left over in it, but another budget may be $50,000 short. And knowing the conversations that you've had about spending fund balance and not knowing where this budget will end up the year, you're kind of gambling. And Dean and I talked yesterday afternoon. We wish there was a way that we could say, if the budget looks like this, then buy. Do you know what I mean? But we won't know that till probably February. And so that's our concern. We support this concept. We've used it before, but frankly, we don't know whether this year is going to be a positive year or potentially a negative year like we had in 2005. And with that, I guess I'd ask Dean to add to that.
Dennis is correct. It takes us until the end of January to close the books, and only then do you know how you're going to end the year in the general fund. The Sheriff's Office, however, does have a number of line items where they're spending at less than was budgeted, and but they are in the general fund, and there are other departments where we're tracking not quite so well. The one concern I have in the Sheriff's Office budget is the overtime line item in corrections, or the jail does need to have about another $20,000 to $25,000 appropriated to it. I'm sure we can find those funds to cover that, but there are definitely some line items in a number of departments within the Sheriff's Office budget where there are funds that could be potentially used as a budget adjustment to cover vehicles, but we just will not know what those are. I think the need, though, to replace Lieutenant Monroe's car is more immediate, and that might be one that we can easily identify budget dollars that we could make, budget transfers to cover. We talked about that.
I agree with that, too, because, typically if we have a vehicle that has an accident and is totaled out, we just replace it. We replace it anyway, so I just don't know whether that's a priority of the sheriff's or whether he'd rather have that replaced or have a patrol car. That's the only question I didn't know.
The vehicle needs to be replaced, and I guess in a prioritization scheme, I would have the two vehicles at this point, Lieutenant Monroe's vehicle would be at the top of the list.
Okay.
Just to add on to what Dean has been saying, we have identified specifically in the jail budget, there was an unexpended amount of money in the equipment line item that, correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, but everything was lower than we expected and not needed potentially. So there's an example, 20-some thousand dollars in one line item that is not going to be expended in 2009.
Then I imagine the food line item, the
Food line
medical line item are
So
all
there,
lower.
I think there is money there that we may be able to use for covering of overtime. My initial figures in this summation did not include the unexpended personnel funds, and there's very little. I would like to, I guess, to the degree that you should understand, we don't want to break this budget either. We believe that if we could have at least 2 vehicles out of this funding, we need to order the vehicles. If we're going to order patrol vehicles, there's a time frame there that they have to be in by the first of the year, and that's pushing it at this point. So that may not be the wisest decision at this point, because we may not be able to satisfy all the requirements there. But we would like to purchase 2 vehicles at least, and I've identified up to $150,000 in our budgets that we could use. We have been pinching this for several months in anticipation of no vehicles in 2010. And so if those vehicles are needing to be used vehicles, we're just requesting that.
Which ones are your priorities then?
At this point, the 2 vehicles in the corrections division.
In the corrections division, okay.
And then we have 2 vehicles as an example in the investigative services division. We're replacing an engine in one of the vehicles that's a used engine because the engine's shot.
Two comments. First, my first comment is, I have to tell you that I tend to agree with Nate. I do agree with Nate on this. When I saw the numbers in here, and we're talking about used vehicles that might have 50 or 57,000 miles on it, that's a lot of miles, and we trade them in when we get to 120, and of course it depends on the use. Buck doesn't drive quite as much as a road patrol vehicle, so we're not going to be using that. I told Nate early on, if we were looking at a used vehicle that was maybe one of these certified vehicles that still had part of the warranty or something, and they're 20,000 miles, to me, that's a reasonable point to go. But if it's a vehicle that's traveled very much, I too am hesitant to buy used vehicles. But I guess if the situation is that dire and that's what we have to do, then that would be your choice. But I'm not crazy about the idea of buying used vehicles like that. I don't think that's a good practice.
Well, I'm inclined to think when I look at the used vehicles that are listed on the sheet, there's the 2000 Ford Edge, for example, the 2008 Ford Edge. There's only $4,000 difference between that vehicle and it with 57,000 miles and a 2010 same vehicle. For $4,000, we might as well have
With all
a
the
brand new
warranties.
unit with all the warranties and not having miles on it. Mike?
Would it be the safer thing to do at this point to simply replace Lieutenant Monroe's vehicle, since that seems to be a priority, and then wait for a month or two to see if we get a better handle on the budget and where we end up in '09? I hate to say that.
Will you feel better in November, Dean, or doing it in December? You say we have to get it ordered by the end of the year.
If we're going to have used, it takes 4 to 8 weeks for patrol vehicles to arrive. That process takes a while, so we would be out, we're almost outside the window now.
Well, what I'm saying, though, Nate, is I think we've just been centering this discussion on the 2 corrections vehicles, and what about those 2 vehicles? If we decided to do Lieutenant Monroe's vehicle to now, and then did what is the second correction vehicle, Bob? Oh, one?
No, the second correction vehicle.
Is that the van, the transport van?
No.
Oh.
No, you'll see that next year.
Okay.
It's Captain Hall's vehicle.
Oh. God, I would love to do something with Captain Hall's vehicle. He's the biggest guy in the department. He's got the smallest vehicle in the department. I don't know how he did it. I tried to get Buck to take it off his hands, but Buck wouldn't take it. It was too small for Buck.
And those would both be used vehicles, the 2 we're talking about. The 2 at Captain Hall's and Lieutenant
Yeah,
Mahorn.
those were the 2 of the vehicles we were considering using used vehicles for. That process would be easier to go to a lot with a not-to-exceed amount. You can replace those relatively easily. If you're going to use used vehicles, that would be the service that I would use used vehicles for. I just am not a big fan of used vehicles for a myriad of reasons.
Nate, could I ask you one? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would agree with Sonny. Used vehicles in the police department fleet I think would be a mistake, particularly for the small dollar savings involved, and I'd just soon purchase new vehicles with warranties.
Used vehicles have a very valued place in police vehicles with the investigation division and things because they blend in. So, there is a purpose to purchase old vehicles, but I don't believe this is the place to do it.
Nate, it was, I know this was a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking back, I don't think we've really purchased any vehicles this year in the budget, but, and I know that the board prefers and the sheriff's department prefers to bid vehicles locally if we can, but did we look at all at state purchasing to see if there were any vehicles on the state purchasing list? I know we bought some Tauruses a few years ago, and they were $13,000, $14,000,
If you look at
new.
the list that I
Is
sent.
it on there, Nate?
Along with the Signature Auto, it's the Macomb County bid, which is the state
State
bid. And that is, these prices have gone up. You are correct. Tauruses were $14,000 3 years ago. They're now up to 18.
So that is the state
That
bid?
is yes. So these vehicles, it's the Macomb County bid, which I believe the state of Michigan is under.
Mm-hmm, okay.
That is the Signature Auto bid.
Yeah, I guess in terms of that, I agree with what Commissioner Fleece said. If we decided we were going to buy vehicles, then the Taurus for $18,500 would seem to be a better choice. And I agree that a new vehicle rather than a used vehicle to save a couple $1,000s is really not, I don't know that it's prudent in the long run for us. I didn't realize those were state bid.
Are the Escapes a better fit vehicle than the Taurus is for you?
We have one Escape in our fleet right now in the Detective Bureau, and so far, we're very happy with that vehicle.
It's a
It's a smaller vehicle.
SUV.
It's a smaller SUV
Yes.
Is
version.
that Detective Postal's
Yes.
vehicle?
Which vehicles would you be looking at, Nate, if we were buying two for corrections?
Well, I guess what I've been leaning towards at this point have been the vehicles that Captain Hall identified, the Ford Edge and the Jeep Commander through the used process, but that's not the case. I would lead towards either an Escape or a Taurus. Problem is, those are both smaller vehicles. A Sebring perhaps.
The Escape, or the Taurus, isn't it redesigned next year?
Yeah, it's the
But
Taurus
I don't know what it looks like.
SHO, it's.
That's right.
These vehicles that we're talking about don't necessarily have to have the bigger engines. I noticed the Bill Marsh bids on the Chargers, they have the V6s in them, and I'm guessing if we're talking about patrol vehicles, we're going to want to go to the V8s.
Yeah, for the durability of it, mostly, but the V6s they're good vehicles. I've not heard bad things about the Charger V6s, but the patrol packages are the V8s. That is an option as well. That is a nice sized vehicle.
I thought the priority was two vehicles for corrections.
That's correct.
Is that
That's
correct?
correct. I was just making reference to the patrol vehicles and the Chargers. They are the 8-cylinders.
Dean, how do you feel about, if we're in the $36,000 range for two vehicles, $37,000 range, how do you feel about the likelihood that the budget would be able to support those two corrections vehicles?
Well, Nate and I actually have talked a little bit about that. We feel we can identify those funds, and that's what we would like to do, is perhaps bring back a formal budget amendment to Ways and Means, and perhaps even identify more funds than that would be available, and let Ways and Means then decide what they're comfortable with. By then, I should have a better handle on where I think we're going to end 2009.
In 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking it might be good to go ahead and have this committee make a recommendation on the two corrections vehicles and have you come back to public safety in 4 weeks and tell us what else we might be able to do, and then hopefully still have time to order it.
That's fine with me if that fits with, Nate's
Would you-
more
would
familiar with the time it
Would the extra couple weeks help you in terms of having a better picture on the budget, Dean?
Well, absolutely. That having more time, you have more payrolls captured, and almost 11 months worth of history at that point. So
I guess our recommendation would be for you to consider buying the 2 corrections vehicles this month, and then have Dean report back to you next month at this meeting and tell you what else he thinks he can do.
Commissioner Fleece?
I would move that we recommend the purchase of 2 vehicles for the Corrections Division in the amount of not to exceed $38,000, if possible.
Okay, I support
Do you
that.
prefer one or the other, or do you want to just leave it and you decide whether there escapes or?
I guess I'd like to talk to Lieutenant Monroe and Captain Hall about.
How about we keep it under the 38 and we bring back and add it to the resolution that goes to the board, what the 2 vehicles will be?
Yes,
that's fine.
And it'll be from signature from state purchasing, correct?
Yes, yes.
Well, even if it was from Bill Martin,
Oh,
if
okay.
it's a suitable vehicle.
As long as it's under the 38.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because they know what they need best.
And it would be nice if we could keep it local, too.
Right.
Well, we like that, but... Okay, we have a motion by Fleece, supported by Hooper, to authorize the purchase of 2 vehicles for the Corrections Division of the Sheriff's Office, not to exceed $38,000. Any further discussion?
The way I'm looking at it really is based on what Dennis said earlier. If a vehicle's totaled out, we just replace the vehicle anyway. So really, in reality, we're replacing 1 vehicle.
That's really true.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. No gold wheels, Bob.
The second item on the agenda is just for your information only, and I don't have the agenda item, I apologize. But we met with CMH at the request of Commissioner Friend and Commissioner Wheelock. We met with Greg Paffhouse and his staff, Captain Hall, Lieutenant Monroe, and I. The purpose was to discuss the requirements of the county to provide mental health services to the inmates in the county jail. It was simply a meeting to discuss the Attorney General's opinion, what we believe to be were the services that have historically been provided to the jail, what services are presently being provided to the jail, and what services we felt needed to be provided to the jail. The group at large agreed that there used to be more services, mental health services to the jail, that the services that are being provided now are inadequate, and that there should be a definition of what services were needed in the jail. It was a good discussion. Apparently, the agreement had changed slightly since its inception. And we did not have a copy of that agreement at the time, but we do now, and we still believe that we are operating under the same understanding as we have been historically.
Community mental health has the same responsibilities they had under the old contract.
I believe that is the case. The county gives CMH a certain amount of money, and we expect a certain amount of services for that. We do get services, and the services we get are quality services. We just don't think there's enough. So the ending of that meeting, we decided to set a smaller committee. Captain Hall, Ann Boss, and Art Newhouse are going to identify what needs there are in the jail and to what level. And then we will meet again as a group and decide how those needs are going to be met. The reason I bring this forward to you is just a measure of accountability for us. I want you to know that this process is going on, so you can have involvement if you so choose, but also know that we have concerns about the mental health services in our jail, and we're trying to address them. We don't exactly know who has to pay for those at this point, but we're going to work that out.
I guess I'd add on to that, as all of you are aware, I've been pretty verbal about the inadequacies of what I believe to be the mental health services within our jail. Therefore, I probably was part of the cause of this meeting. But I believe that the consensus coming out of that meeting without question is that we have an inadequate amount of service in our jail. The Attorney General's opinion that Nate references makes a comment that if the county requires additional mental health services in the jail, the county is required to pay for those. My argument's always been, well, what is the $682,000 that we're paying to Great Lakes Mental Health for? But, we'll get to that, and it will come through with that. One of the concerns that I had is the fact that the agreement that Nate had and the agreement that I had was 3 or 4 pages long. I believe if I counted pages right when my email was being printed off the other day, the new agreement's 38 pages long. I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't got through all of that yet. So, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff been added in here, and I don't know how much stuff has been removed out of it when it was rewritten. That was in 2003 was the rewrite?
I believe that is correct.
I believe. So, we are working forward with it. I believe without question is the expressed need to better serve the mental health needs within our jail, because we cannot properly classify prisoners as they're coming in. And then the other discussion is if we have the capabilities in the jail to assess whether or not this person should be deferred out of the jail into some other treatment facility, whereas they would never come to jail in the first place, at least not initially. We need to address their mental status immediately upon the time that they're picked up, and we do not have that capability now. So, more to come, I guess.
When does the group meet again?
After Captain Hall and do you have a date for your meeting? Okay. Good.
I think that's I know that's an extremely important issue that we need to address. And like Sonny said, $682,000, I realize that's some agreement that theoretically we're involved in and maybe couldn't get out of, but I disagree with that. And not only the incarceration of mentally ill people in the county jail, that's the wrong place. The patrol officers out on the bricks, when you need a mental health person and you can't get anybody to come, and it's obvious to the lay person that the person you're dealing with is mentally ill, that's a travesty of justice, and we need to take care of it. And it's not necessarily community mental health's problem. I think they could bend way more than they do, but I firmly believe that it's the mental health code in the state of Michigan and throughout the United States. It's a real boondoggle. I worked under both systems prior to mental health when we had the state hospital, and there's a significant difference. And I've seen a number of people lose their lives because of no help being available from community mental health, or it wasn't available in a timely fashion. So I think that meeting that Captain Hall's going to attend is really critical.
And it's a serious problem, as you stated. There's not just for us, but it's the victims of the crime that was just committed by the mentally ill person. There needs to be a solution there, and unfortunately the solution, in most instances, is you're going to jail. There is no other place for that person to go that has just committed a crime against another person. And if that act has been a manifestation of a disability in some way, shape, or form, they shouldn't be in jail.
That's right.
They need to be treated, and that disability needs to be attended to. We just don't have those resources yet. Hopefully someday we will. There's always going to be, there was reference to a mental health court, there's always going to be an arrest. So we have to have services in the jail, and those services have to be adequate because there's always going to be that arrest and that pre-trial detention.
Okay, moving on.
Last item is Marine Safety Grant. 2010 Marine Safety Grant is due at the end of this year. Typically, this is a 75% match with the DNR. We do not have a set amount we normally do at this point, but the state, apparently they're having some financial difficulties and can't tell us exactly how much is there yet. So, but we are going to be allotted some funding through the DNR. We just don't know how much. We have historically received up to approximately $75,000, and we expend approximately $200,000.
Nate, is that they provide 75% of certain things, but what I can't remember is that 75,000 a cap?
Yes.
Okay.
They will provide that up to that amount.
Up to that amount,
75%
okay.
of all expenditures.
And if for some reason they come back and they say, we can only give you 35 this year,
I will bring that back to the
Okay.
commissioners. And that has happened in one other cost center. The secondary road grant did that. We brought that back. And what we have done in that specific arena is we reduce the amount of services to secondary road commensurate with the grant reduction.
Well, I was gonna say, I would move that we approve the submission of a 2010 Marine Safety Grant to the Department of Natural Resources by the Sheriff's Department.
Motion by Hooper, supported by Stepka, to make application to the DNR for the $75,000, which would be the maximum amount. I guess the discussion that I would have is, we have a pretty sizable marine budget, and we all know that. One thing that I would ask, and it has nothing to do with this grant, but it has to do with talking about our marine budget. I know in Long Lake Township specifically contracts with the Sheriff's Department for marine services on Long Lake. And I know those are supplemental services. I'm not exactly sure how many hours on the lake they would get if they didn't do that, but basically they pay for quite a bit of time on the lake. I'm wondering if some of the other lake associations or townships might be interested in doing the same thing and help us supplement this $197,000. Even if we get the 75 grand, we're still $125,000 short of funding the marine program in Grand Traverse County next year. All that money comes out of our general fund.
It's funded, but
We
it costs
have
the
it
general
funded,
fund.
but it costs this county $125,000 out of our money, out of general fund money, to fund the Marine Division. And I believe that if we talk to some of those townships and those lake associations, they really want that service on their lakes, and they may help us fund some of that.
Of course, it's important to remember that the impact on the budget in that regard will be somewhat limited, because if they're going to pay, they're going to expect more hours, not less hours, or not the same amount of hours, in all likelihood. And so, unless you say, we're going to cut this budget back, and then people say, we'll pay, it's going to be hard to have an impact on the budget itself at the level that we're at now.
I just think it's a good way to let the people on those lakes know what it costs to operate this service.
I don't exactly understand how the DNR allocates that amount of money in the formula they use, but I will tell you that although we have near a $200,000 marine budget, we have a lot of lakes. And the Marine Division, we have one full-time employee that is split between the Patrol Division and the Marine Division as a supervisor, and then the remaining employees through that budget are all seasonal. They're seasonal employees. They're here for 4 months at very, say, low rates of pay, but much lower than a deputy. So it's as efficient as it could be, it can be, but we have a lot of lakes, and those lakes need to be patrolled. And I wish the state would ante that up a little bit and give us some additional funding, but I don't understand the formula. But I do have concern about reducing the services and then having the townships or the associations pay for service. Long Lake has supplemented their service, and they do get both that officer as well as normal marine patrol on Long Lake. Some days you'll see 2 patrol boats, conceivably, on Long Lake versus...
I noticed on Duck Lake one day, the deputy used his siren, and half the people I talked to were aware that he stopped somebody. They should use that siren more often, because all the people around the lake take notice. They can hear it out there. They're not here to be, and really, I heard a lot of people say, boy, somebody got nailed out there for doing something wrong. Well,
Yeah.
otherwise they don't know it because they don't see them out there. But they can hear that siren. You got to give that little toot for everybody.
And the next
Except when
person
he's
to
bothering you when I'm
stop
fishing.
Yeah. They are loud. They get your
Oh, yeah,
attention.
but
They
they're-
disturb people.
It's effective to get the
Yeah.
whole people around the lake, gives them notice, I think. I think it is.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Anything from me? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you, Nate. I believe the next order of business is Bruce from Construction Code.
Well, this is just a letter of thank you that we got concerning the project, one of our projects that the department worked on. Bruce is here to, answer any questions that you may have. This was, sorry, I'm just getting to this project. This was on the Cambria Suites project, and it was just very complimentary of our staff and their cooperation in the work that we do. You know, from time to time, we get complaints.
This is a direct conflict to the one we got last month.
Well, yeah, I think we had 2 last month, but, you know, I have to tell you that really, in my experience is this county, we really get less complaints, frankly, than other places I've been. I think we do, our staff does a really good job, and I really want to compliment Bruce and his management of the staff. That doesn't mean that there won't be disagreements. There are always disagreements when you're regulating somebody, you know, but I think generally our staff does a very professional job, and these days, in kind of really trying times, remember, we've I think, laid off 8 of 21 employees in that department because the workload has been down. And when you limit the number of employees, unfortunately, the projects continue to go on. We still feel very strongly that we have to service them to the highest level and be there as quick as we can, because any construction, any development is a good thing for us, you know, especially in these tough times. So I know our guys work very hard to do that. We don't always make everybody happy, but I compliment them on their good work, and I appreciate getting this letter from Apex Construction Management. Did you want to say anything, Bruce?
Are we going to talk to them later about that?
Right after this meeting, we're going to have a meeting on the Lake Ridge Association question. The chairman is going to meet with Bruce and I. In fact, Bruce is going to go back and get the file, so we can have that meeting right after this.
Good. Okay, this brings us to the second opportunity for public comment this morning. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to make comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to unfinished business. I don't show any, Dennis. Did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, brings us down to the letter we received from Mr. Bifus from the city of Traverse City.
Ben, did you want to
This came to
address
us on the
committee?
consent calendar, and we pulled it, referred it
Up to
back
you.
to public safety.
Ben's going to talk to you for a minute.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning. Aaron Byfoss, Traverse City Manager. Very briefly, there are some questions from the commission regarding some potential inequities, and the commission would like you to appoint a committee to meet with a committee of the commission to just talk through those issues. It's really as simple as that.
Okay. I noticed in this letter, it also talks about discussion about possible cooperation between the city police and the sheriff's department. You know, the mayor and I have had that discussion when I was board chairman a couple times, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of questions how that would work or those kind of things, but I have no problem having the discussion. Our board chairman is here. Dennis, do you have a recommendation, reference, an appointment of a committee, or, you know, would the chairman make that appointment?
You know, I mean, that's up to the board. I don't know.
I think public safety ought to do it.
I'm fine with that. I do have a recommendation of some thoughts that I'd like you to consider in terms of how you appoint.
All right.
Okay? First of all, I would say that it's important to remember what Lynn Harvey told us the other day. The committee you appoint is a committee, when the board appoints a committee to represent them, they're representing them, not the individual opinions of the commissioners that they appoint. I think that's an important thing to remember. Secondly, I think it's important for you to remember that in order for them to be successful, they need to know what the county board thinks when they go in there to have those discussions. Okay? So I would suggest to you that whoever you appoint on the committee, first of all, I think there needs to be a city representative for sure, because it is a city issue. I think the committee should go in and try to obtain facts and get information first, without any kind of preconceived notions of where this is going to go or opinions about what's right or what's wrong. And then I think they need to come back to the county board and have a discussion and try to assess the position of the county board, and then return to that committee to talk about or to talk or negotiate or discuss any kind of solution to the issue. I just think taking those steps are really important in the way you address the issue. I think I think, we can't draw conclusions early on. We need to have the discussion, we need to collect the facts, and I think most importantly, we need to remember that whoever represents you should represent the county board's position, not individual positions.
I asked that this be returned back to public safety because it was on our consent calendar as a receive and file situation, if you remember. I believe that, that discussion has to happen here, as part of our committee process. I guess from this point, I would say that the county, at least from my perspective, is certainly interested in forming a ad hoc committee, whatever you want to call it, jointly with the city of Traverse City, to have this discussion. I'd like to have a little time to, think about who should be seated on that committee. And, if it'd be all right with everyone, I would like to speak with the board chairman and other commissioners along the way, and by Ways and Means or the county board meeting, make the appointments, if that would be okay.
Sounds good.
Just, I think, a number of us have had some of these discussions along the way, Dick and I can tell you, we had this discussion 10 years ago.
Well, Dick and Larry have been talking about this for,
Because
with the city for a
We had
year.
this discussion when Ralph Staffordini retired, with the mayor at that time. So this isn't a new discussion. It's not something we have to make a decision on in the next 2 weeks, but it is something that we definitely should, in these times, certainly consider. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to mention, I want to go back and look at the board rules to make sure that we're making the appointments in the appropriate manner. I know there's something in there about ad hoc committees being established, and, quite honestly, I don't recall any individual committee making committee appointments
I
like
think the
this.
chairman has to make the appointment.
Yeah, I think it may be, the chairman's prerogative, but it would take me a minute or two to kind of look through this, but...
Okay, that brings us, is there any further business to come before this committee? Seeing none, we stand adjourned at 8:13. All gone home now.